All right, we've got lesson 4, but this is going to be part 2. So in part 1, we used the unit circle right here, okay, and all this information to figure out what these values were when we wanted to simplify them. So things like cosine of 3 pi over 4, so 3 pi over 4 is right here, cosine is the x value. So cosine of 3 pi over 4, negative root 2 over 2. Okay, so hopefully pretty straightforward. And we're going to use some of the same information, but now we're going to use it to graph cosine and sine. Okay, so I'm going to slide down, but I'm going to be working back and forth here. All right, and I'm going to ask you to graph the trig function. So I want to focus here. All right, so using these circles, fill in the table values for the cosine function. And then in parentheses, I put, remember which coordinate of the unit pair represents cosine. And I'm going to remind you that the cosine is the x value from your coordinates. Okay? Now, in my table of values here, I have very specific theta values. Okay, so we're not going to fill in every single cosine value from the unit circle. If I remember correctly, there's like 17 or 20 of them. No, I'm not asking you to fill those in. All right, I'm just looking for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values. Okay, so if theta is 0, I'm going to be working back and forth. So theta is 0, 0, 0 degrees, right? Doesn't matter which one. And I'm looking at this ordered pair right here. Cosine is the x value, so I'm going to take that 1 right there. Okay, so cosine is 1. My next theta value is pi over 2. All right, so I'm going to rotate through these. Right here is pi over 2. Okay, it's 90 degrees. Scroll down so I can actually see the top here. And in my ordered pair, the ordered pair is 0, 1. The cosine value, remember, is the first part. It's the x value. It's going to be 0. Okay. So cosine of pi over 2 is 0. All right. So back to my unit circle here. My next radian value is pi, and the cosine of pi is negative 1. Okay. I actually think I can read this one off the bottom here. 3 pi over 2 down here is 270 degrees. 3 pi over 2 as cosine is 0. Okay, so 0 here. And the last one in our ordered, last one in our set here is 2 pi. So remember that 2 pi right here is 360 degrees. It's a full revolution, which brings us right back to where we started from, which is this ordered pair of 1, 0. And so this point right here, this x value of 1 is the cosine value. So there we go. Okay, so our table of values is filled out. Again, that was just using the x values for each of the theta values, okay, that I had given you in the chart. Okay, so we are going to use this table of values to graph this. Now, it's a little bit weird, but I don't know if you can see this. Down here, your x-axis is actually filled out in radians. And this is really common for graphing trig functions, to fill it out in radians. And if you remember from the last mini module, we had problems where you had things like the period, and the period was something like 2 pi or 4 pi. That's because we were measuring it in radians, not in degrees. Okay? So I'm going to start graphing these. All right. And we have theta is 0, cosine's 1. So I'm going to go to 0 here, and cosine's 1. All right, so I'm going to put a little point here. My next ordered pair is pi over 2. So pi over 2 is right here, and I need to go to 0. Well, this means I'm going to stay on the x-axis. Okay, next point is pi negative 1. So I'm going to go pi is right here, so it's the next unit over, and I need to go down to negative 1. Okay, And then I've got, let's see, 3 pi over 2, 0. So 3 pi over 2 is going to go back to 0. Okay. And last one, I've got 2 pi, and the cosine value is 1. So 2 pi, cosine value is 1. Okay. I don't know about you guys, but this thing looks like a V to me. However, what I need you to know is that this is a repeated pattern. Okay, you guys saw in the last mini unit that this is that periodic function that's just going to keep bouncing up and down and up and down. Well, here's the high part of the bounce, here's the low part of the bounce. So what I can actually do, and I'm going to switch colors here so you can see these are the points that I got right from the table of values from the unit circle. Okay, so if this is my high point, I'm going to bounce down. The next point would be in the middle, or the midline. Okay, and then from here I would drop down to the minimum. Okay, I can follow this same idea over to the left. I'm at the maximum here. My next point would be at the midline. Okay, then I would drop down to the minimum, bounce back up to the midline, up to the maximum, down, and down to the minimum. All right, so as you're going to play connect the dots here, I'm going to go ahead and highlight this in. Cosine is a smooth, continuous curve. Okay? So I'm not looking for perfection here in terms of being able to graph this really, really perfectly, but, okay, I will tell you things that will not work for Miss Current. Okay, this purple graph looks decent. It's not great. I understand I'm working with a pencil. Some of you guys, when you do your notes, are going to be working with your fingertip. It's not going to be perfect. It's okay. However, do not, I cannot stress this enough, do not play connect the dots with straight lines. Okay, that's just, it's not right in any way, shape, or form. Just don't do it. Okay, that's not how a cosine curve looks. That's not how a sine curve looks. So keep in mind, I keep saying the words curve, and there is a reason I say those. These are curves, so make them look like curves. Okay, enough of that for right now. So we took our table of values, we filled it out using the unit circle. We took the table of values, we've now graphed it, and from the graph, I want to find our key features. Okay, so key feature number 1 is the domain. So if I look from left to right, this is a smooth, continuous curve, no breaks, no gaps. Domain is negative infinity to infinity. Okay, if I look at my range, I absolutely have a low and a high point. So this curve is only going to bounce between -1 and +1. That's it. Okay, so make sure you use your brackets, -1 to 1, and that's the entirety of our range. Everything within cosine here has to be between those values. Okay, period. In this case, there's lots of different ways to find it. I think a few of you found some luck where you would mark off a high point to a high point and count the period between them, keeping in mind that we are dealing with radian values down here on the x-axis. Okay, that was from 0 to 2 pi is your period. Okay, maximum value, we've talked about that in our range. That's going to be that +1. Minimum value, we've talked about that in the range, is -1. Okay, midline, I said it a few times as I was graphing. So the midline, remember, is going to be the average of our max and min. Okay, so if we do 1/2, our maximum is 1 plus our minimum is -1, that will get me 0. Okay, so the midline here is y equals 0. I don't need to put a box around that. And our amplitude here, we're going to do 1/2 the distance between our two max and min points. So that's going to be 1 minus -1. So that's going to be 1/2 times 2. And our amplitude is 1. Okay. So that is the basic graph of the cosine curve. That's all the key features from the basic cosine curve. If any of this is causing you confusion or concerns, send me a message. Let me know what your questions are, and I will help you out. I'll do a separate video for sine later on.